Somebody noted in the live chat, I did not see this, but I got to figure that this tally can be ongoing each college football season. But College Football News has gone through all of the AP polls since 1936. So I just looked this up based on what was left in the live chat. They've gone through all the AP polls from 1936 through the latest one, and implemented some type of point system. So that could be done a number of ways. I could assume that if you finish number 25 in the country, you get 1 point. If you finish number 1, you get 25 points, something like that, and etc. And Oklahoma has the most points since the AP poll started in 1936. So Oklahoma has been, by that measurement, the most successful in the AP poll at number 1. Alabama's close at number 2. Ohio State at number 3. You could give that to any college football fan that pays attention, and you would understand that those 3 teams are going to be at the top, and it's very close. And then a bit of a drop off to Notre Dame, Michigan, USC, Nebraska, which has to have been much higher the last few years. They've taken a beating the last 7 years. They haven't sniffed a top 25 poll since 2014. Texas 8, Penn State 9, Tennessee 10. So Oklahoma fans can take some pride in that. I don't know if that really proves a lot, except for that they're, of course, as we already knew, highly ranked most seasons and as impressive as anybody in the AP poll.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. I think, one of the things, it's always an interesting debate for me, Mark. And we did an article, and we're looking to do another one, just kind of a refresh version about 3 or 4 years ago. Looking at the top 15, top 25 blue bloods, in college football, and the debate's always interesting. To me, Mark, just on the criteria that the people look at in terms of what what really constitutes a blue blood. And I think this is one of the big criteria, right? What's your AP number 1 rankings, top 5 finishes. Some of the criteria that we've looked at in the past is obviously number of national championships was maybe the biggest the biggest criteria. But when you take into account some things, other things such as All Americans, some things such as conference championships, some things such as how many draft picks, first round draft picks, or just overall draft picks have come from that school. It's very interesting. And when you look at it, exactly to your point, when you look at all of those combined, you've got probably some, when you're looking at a top 5, you've got some combination of Oklahoma, Michigan, Notre Dame, Alabama, and probably Ohio State that are right there in the top 5. So we'll this will be a shameless plug for me, but we'll look at doing something like that in the off season and look to see maybe how that has changed from year to year over the last 5 years. But yeah, I mean, when you look at that, Oklahoma is obviously definitely in that top 5, but it's always interesting to look at what do people feel is the most important criteria or the most important category, or however you want to state it, on what constitutes this team or this program being a blue blood.
Yeah, so I find this debate intriguing, and I've started to tackle it a few times and have had the request on the main channel from a number of people to tackle this, and I've thought about it and wanted to know, okay, what would be the best criteria? Do you consider a national championship in 1950 to be as valuable as a national championship in 2021? Or would that have to be weighted in some way? Because shoot, forget 1950. How about 1889 awarding national championships? You got to give it some weight, but do you just flat out say national championships are national championships? And here you go. Whose national championships? That's the other thing.
Mm-hmm.
Whose national championships? We've got so many. If you added up all the national championships claimed by everyone in the country, it probably adds up to about 400. Well, we've been playing college football for, I think, 150 years. So it's obviously we've got way more national championships claimed than years. Alabama's maybe the number one
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right.
on
I
the
mean,
list of claiming national championships that are somewhat tainted.
right. I think they've claimed somewhere 16, 17, even maybe even more.
I think they're at
Yeah,
18.
what I've always done is just kind of looked at the AP, just who the AP has recognized as the national champion, and a lot of it's in total. I mean, I think someone has mentioned here in the chat that Michigan's only 12 wins away. All time wins is another big one, and I think the debate for me always always ends up being how much how much weight do you give national championships? Because when you look at and how far back do you go to consider a team a blue blood? Because I mean, Clemson's a great example. Um, if when you go back when you, if you go back from the last 50 years, they're definitely not even probably not even in the conversation. They've got one
No,
before Dabo came. They've got one national championship before that. But over the last 10 to 15 years, yeah, I think most people would consider them a blue blood. Maybe even Georgia comes into that same conversation as well, at least at a top 10 level. But and so when you look at a team like Oklahoma, you say, okay, Oklahoma has the tradition and they've continued to be really, really good, but at the same time, Oklahoma hasn't won a national championship in 21 years. So, what kind of bias or what kind of weight do you put in on recency versus the over the last 50 years? So it's such an intriguing conversation to have.
see, I'm with Preston here, and I didn't even read his entire statement. There are two things to me, and if somebody else has something else, please offer it. But there are basically two objective criteria. Everything else is subjective. National championships are subjective. They are really subjective. Now we've gotten to a place where they're subjectively selected, the playoff teams, and then they win the national championship on the field. So we have the most objective national champion today than we've ever had. And then before that, the BCS championship game. But understand that even the selection of those teams is completely subjective. It's not the NFL playoffs where wins and losses are all they count. So to me, there are only two objective measures. Number one is your win-loss record. Those were the results on the field. Now, you can argue who played a tougher schedule. You can always do that. But the wins and losses are completely objective.
Mhm.
And conference championships are objective. You play in a conference, the winner of the conference is the conference champion. Nobody's deciding anything. We don't have a committee. We don't have a poll. We don't have, you won your conference, you didn't win your. So I put a lot on conference championships and I put a lot on winning percentage. I believe the winning percentage battle right now, Ohio State and Alabama are like, they have almost the exact same winning percentage. It's like 731, and Oklahoma's right behind them.
Yeah.
That's your winning percentage battle right now. Michigan, of course, is going to claim wins, and they're valid. They are valid wins. They're in the record book, but they started playing football a lot sooner than a lot of other teams. So that's, but their winning percentage is certainly up there in the top five. So it's not like their wins total is invalid. But for me, the national championships, do they mean something? Yes. The further we go along in history, the more they are meaningful. But I'm a big winning percentage guy and conference championships because, again, those are objective.
No, you're absolutely right. I agree 100%. I mean, it's a much better criteria, I think, than looking at just all time wins is looking at win percentage. So, I mean, I think the one thing another thing that's really kind of interesting just to debate is when you look at conference championships and see, the over the years which conferences have been better, right? When you look at the SEC hasn't always been the premier conference in the country like it's been over the last 10, 15, 20 years for a good period in the 70s. well, probably more of the 80s and 90s, the Big Eight, with Oklahoma and Nebraska and Colorado almost every year being a perennial top 10, 15 program, in yeah, late 70s and then throughout the 80s, the Big Eight was considered one of the best, one of the best conferences in the country. And I think when I was doing a little bit of research, Mark, looking at the Big Ten, it's just it's so interesting to see how many conference championships, and just looking over the last 50 years, how many conference championships Ohio State and Michigan have compared to the rest of the Big Ten. It's a significant drop off, and you could probably say the same thing for Oklahoma and Nebraska in the 70s and 80s to that extent. But yeah, it's very interesting. How much weight do you give through a period of conference championships in the SEC or the Big Eight or the Big Ten at that time versus maybe the Pac? Well, it would have been the Pac-10 at that time, and or even the ACC, where you've seen different teams have really just been dominant through different eras, right? You've had Florida State that was really dominant through a long period of time. You've had of course, Miami was really more Big East, I guess, at that time, weren't they? But then, but so it's very interesting conversation to have for sure.
And you brought up NFL draft selections. It could be debated on one hand, what's it matter, NFL draft selections, that those players have moved on, and that's the NFL evaluation, the pro football evaluation of those players. That doesn't necessarily mean that they produced well in college. There's so much that goes into that, but I think it's an interesting, and that's just another metric that pretty much falls in line with everything else. If you look at the top 5 to 10 programs that have produced the most number one picks, meaning first round selections and NFL draft picks, they're the same teams. It's still Ohio State and Alabama, USC, Oklahoma, on down the line. It's still the same collection of teams. So there must be some validity to it. I consider the Heisman Trophy to be the most prestigious award in American sports.
Mm-hmm.
People remember who wins the Heisman Trophy. People remember, for as popular as the NFL is, and it is king of TV ratings, people don't remember who wins the NFL MVP. Very few people keep track. The Heisman Trophy, it's very prestigious, but again, it's subjective. People decided who supposedly is the best player in the country. It's not, I don't know that should be weighed in very heavily. For one reason, it's individual. Number two, again, it's an award.
Yeah, no, it really is, and I think you've got the same guys, the same people that are still there. I think there's a lot of with the discussion about this. I mean, I don't think there's a lot. I mean, yes, where you place them in the top 10, I think can be a little bit subjective, and just in terms of who has that, the top spot, or anywhere through the top 10. But I think when you look at those teams, they're pretty similar. I think Oklahoma has the I don't know if they have the most Heisman. Alabama probably has the most Heisman trophies. I'm trying to remember.
Alabama just won its first Heisman in 2009.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
I believe 3 or 4. I think Ohio State, Notre Dame, and USC are all tied.
Yeah,
I think.
Okay. So when you and I think they have. Do they have 5? All have 5 apiece,
They all
or
have 7.
7? Okay, because Oklahoma is at. I think Oklahoma is at either 5 or 6 right now. I'm trying to remember.
I think they all have 7. So according to this article, Ohio State, Oklahoma, and Notre Dame have 7.
Okay.
And USC's got 6. I thought it was 7, 7, 7 with the other 3. But anyway, that's what that's showing us.